Let's start now with the countries we are interested in, and first of all, Romania, of course. You are an expert on good governance, and you have given a number of interviews on Romanian anti-corruption. We know that after 2016 and especially after 2018, a lot of things changed in Romanian anti-corruption fight. Of course, there are some cases when people are still brought to justice, but generally, this whole campaign, which was going under Laura Koveși, was stopped. And a lot of people I speak with, and even in Romanian media, discuss that now we are in another era, let's say, of Romanian politics where the old parties, the so-called parties of transition, are in power. And I have here a number of questions maybe to ask you and to understand what happens with the Romanian anti-corruption now. We had between 2019 and 2020, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe no, in fact, 2020, 2021, justice minister from the party of Union Save Romania, who was promising to abolish the special section for investigation of crimes in the judicial system. That is effectively the brake which blocks the old type of anti-corruption, and he didn't abolish this special section. So that is my first question would be, why didn't this happen? On the other hand, maybe you're aware of a number of reports where big money seemed to corrupt Romanian security and judicial institutions. I refer especially to the Recorder report on a policeman who claims an influential businessman from one of the regions close to Hungary had access to his personal data within the system of the police. And maybe there is also another case in this sense that about a judge who was accused of corruption and caught in with some money, but after that the case went in such a direction that the judge was reinstated, and she's even observing now the fight against corruption in her judicial institution. And at least my impression from talk with people is that big money corrupt Romanian institutions, including Presa. There are reporting again. Recorder wrote about how big party money spoil media. So, with this big context, what goes on with Romanian anti-corruption and with the justice in general in Romania after 2018?
Romanian anti-corruption is sort of dead in the water if you look at the anti-corruption prosecution at DNA, because they are no longer active on high-profile cases. There are many explanations for that. When you look at justice in general, the Romanian judiciary received extremely heavy blows during 2017-18 and never managed to recover. It didn't get any help from any politicians. And I think the overall discussion related specifically to rule of law is that the political parties that are in power mainly hate the idea of separation of powers. Now, given these three initial hypotheses, we can go back and discuss the details of your specific questions. You started with the mandate of Stelian Ion, Minister of Justice, back in, I cannot remember, 2020 or 21. That was a time when, after the parliamentary elections, the Liberal Party, together with the Save Romania Union, put together a cabinet, I think with the Hungarian minority as well. And for 1 year, they ruled together. Now, USR, the Save Romania Union, is or was perceived as a very progressive, reformist party, somewhat technocratic, as you put it. But I think they were not prepared to join the cabinet. So I think Stelian Ion got the mandate for Minister of Justice without having a very clear plan regarding what to do as minister. Yes, there was pressure for him to get rid of the special section that investigates crimes committed by magistrates, but he didn't do it. And I think, first of all, he didn't do it because there was not a majority within the cabinet of ministers to take this, to make this decision. The Liberals and the Hungarians really didn't want to take on this reform. They preferred for the special section to remain in power. This special section having been established back in 2018, I think, by the Social Democrats. So basically, USR, a sort of minority party in terms of visions and values, was also a minority party in the governing coalition. And on the other side of the bench, there was a huge majority created by the Liberals, the Hungarian minority, and the Social Democrats. So from this perspective, if you don't have enough power to make a transformation, then maybe you don't make it. Later on, USR was forced out of the cabinet, and the Liberals with the Hungarians joined forces across the aisle with the Social Democrats, and that created the so-called rotation arrangement for the Romanian cabinet. Prime Minister Ciucă from the Liberals maintained this position for about a year and a half, and now we have Mr. Ciolacu from the Social Democrats, again for a mandate of about a year and a half, because we're going to have elections probably in December next year. So this is a sort of a brief way of answering why Stelian Ion didn't go on with that reform. First of all, I think he didn't have this reform as part of his plan. Secondly, I think he miscalculated the resources that were needed in terms of votes. And then when he realized that there was no political support for this particular reform, then he simply quit the idea. Does it make sense?
It sounds plausible. If you wish my opinion, I don't have a fixed opinion on that, but there is this understanding that anti-corruption maybe was doing also division in society. That's what I remember from 2018. Reopening of anti-corruption should mean a leader who does this anti-corruption, and maybe if there is a leader of the type of Laura Koveși, it would also mean further division, and maybe that is also part of some logic that Romanian political elites have agreed that there will be no such type of cutting of meat from them, no matter even if you are technocrat, even if you are progressive, whatever.
I understand that this idea that Romania really doesn't have an anti-corruption champion. I know that Mrs. Koveși is seen in Bulgaria as a sort of a messiah of anti-corruption, but I have my reservations. I would like to remind you and our listeners that the glory days of Mrs. Koveși in terms of anti-corruption in Romania were related to a time when DNA worked very, very closely with the Secret Service. And then a lot of questions arose to what extent DNA was really doing anti-corruption or simply serving the agenda of the Secret Service. In 2016, if I'm not mistaken, we all learned in Romanian society about the secret protocol of cooperation between DNA, the anti-corruption prosecution, and SRI, the Romanian Intelligence Service. And from then on, DNA was no longer seen as the pure messiah that is going to save the nation. In 2017, when Mr. Tudorel Toader, as Minister of Justice, quote-unquote reformed the Romanian judiciary, he basically did everything in his power to make sure that DNA will never have the ability to put politicians in jail or to confiscate their wealth. And then in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Tudorel Toader managed to kill DNA forever by removing Mrs. Koveși from her office. Now, this particular chain of events was extremely detrimental to the independence of Romanian judiciary, because all of the magistrates, both judges and prosecutors in Romania are magistrates. All of the magistrates in Romania learned that politicians always have more power and they can kill any idea of reform. So this is the stage where then Stelian Ion came in as Minister of Justice without really having a reform agenda, and then very soon learning that he doesn't have enough allies, supporters, to take that particular reform and make it happen. I'm not trying to defend Stelian Ion. On the contrary, I am very critical, but I am also critical of Mrs. Koveși, and I think from this particular perspective, when you look at Romania in terms of anti-corruption, you see that two wrongs do not make a right, but rather two wrongs create a larger wrong.
Okay, and I saw in your answer something which makes sense to me for me to ask. Aren't we now in another? If you say there is a even larger wrong, isn't now there this problem, which I mentioned to you, that big money corrupt everything? I mean, politicians, media, even the security and judicial institutions. Maybe, of course, it's easy for a journalist to speak sensationalist, but if this strong anti-corruption entity is stopped, who is now countering corruption in Romania? And at least for me, it's
Nobody.
so. Is there this danger, or is it already happening that the big money spoil everything, and something has to be done?
The danger basically came to the surface when PNL, the National Liberal Party, and PSD, the Social Democratic Party, joined forces to create the new government. We have always suspected that there was some type of cooperation behind the scenes between these two parties. But now, since the new coalition with Prime Minister Ciucă and then Prime Minister Ciolacu, this is very much in your face. There is a reform, quote unquote, taking place in the background. It started in 2015-16 when Romania changed the law on party finance. And since PSD, PNL started cooperating on this particular reform, you can see the budget for political parties increasing almost 8 times. That means that now political parties in Romania, especially the ones in power, PNL and PSD, have a lot of money that they can dispense outside of any public scrutiny, with no transparency requirements. And they pump a lot of money into corrupt media. And when I say corrupt media, I mean corrupt in the sense that like a file on your computer gets corrupted. Not corruption in the sense of bribing, right?
Mm.
Because corrupt media no longer serves the public interest to know what is going on, how political power is being exercised. No, these media outlets screen off the way that political power is being exercised, to serve the interest of the politicians. This is how basically the Minister of Family Matters and Social Protection managed to extend her patronage to a network of healthcare centers that she was basically milking for subsidies. Because nobody in the mainstream media, which is heavily funded by the political parties, nobody wanted to look into this topic. It's only the independent media, very small outlets, most of them organized as NGOs, such as Recorder that you mentioned, or Rise Project, or the Center for Independent for Media Investigations, and De La Zero. These small outlets are the ones that shed light on decision-making processes. They are the only ones that bring some transparency. And so behind the closed doors, the political parties have a huge network where they play with public money for private interest. From this perspective, corruption in terms of medium level and high level corruption in Romania, I think, increased a lot during the past, say, 4 to 5 years. Even though the perception of corruption in terms of small bribery is getting better. So it looks like on the surface, in what matters to regular individuals, things are getting better, but in fact the state institutions are rotten to the core because of political corruption.
Okay, there is something which I observe more pronounced in Romania. I mean, Europeanization is a change. I don't know if you agree with that, with such a label on Romania, but I am following Romanian media, especially national media, and I notice, for example, there are first of all some specific media for European affairs, but also national media dedicate a lot of attention to what is going on in Europe. And also maybe you will contest that, but comparing Bulgarian and Romanian debates for EU legislation, such as, for example, the directive on whistleblowers, I also noticed that in Romania there was debate, there were some trainings, while in Bulgaria I have the feeling it passed somehow unnoticed that this legislation was approved. And so I notice from the Bulgarian point of view that Romania somehow discusses more Europe and maybe makes a more conscious effort to be part of European debates or European social life. I noticed that when there are protests of some labor unions in Germany, in France, even in the UK, Romanian media report about that. So it's important that Romanians know social life, not only who is in power in these countries, but also social life in these countries. So in this, having said all that, I maybe need to add also that there is a policy of promotion of minorities in Romania, which I have the feeling is more complex than the one in Bulgaria. And all that altogether for me suggests that there is some Romanian conscious effort to Europeanize as a way of change. And I wonder how much do you agree with such labeling of Romania or such description of Romanian efforts to change?
it may be the case that I am too close to see it. So I'm not going to dispute your observation, but I would say this. I think that because Romania has a sizable Hungarian-speaking minority, and many of those people also have Hungarian citizenship. And Hungary is another member of the European Union, and even a member of the Schengen agreement. It is important for Romanian society to understand how we relate to at least Hungary. Then we do have a very large emigration from Romania. Some figures look at 4 million Romanians across borders. Other statistics look at 6 million. I don't know the exact figure, and I don't think it's important. But when you have a Romanian mayor elected in Spain, or in Germany, that sort of creates a need for the society in general to understand also what is happening in Spain or in Germany. When you have a German mayor in Romania, the mayor of Timișoara, of course, you're going to also look at what's happening with Germany on the European Sea. So the news reporting related to Europe, I think, has its roots in these two explanations. Then you mentioned other minorities. I think possibly because we do have seats in parliament reserved for every minority, also allows for these people to make news. And then, of course, that news is of public interest, is newsworthy. So probably that's why you see that preoccupation of Romanian society with minorities. But that is also true, I think, not just with national minorities, but it's also true with, for instance, sexual minorities. Now, looking back at this interplay between minorities and the European Union, some of the debates in Romanian society are not always about what is the right decision in Brussels, but more often is about why does Brussels want to impose this decision on us. So it's also an outlet for the sovereignist agenda to permeate into national news. And there was a third element that you mentioned, but escaped my mind. Can you please remind me? You said about Europeanization and minorities.
I also noted. I also spoke about EU legislation, for example, on whistleblowers or general.
Well, yeah. Well, you know, when it comes to European legislation that is somehow related to corruption and anti-corruption, it's very easy for Romanian society to be activated. But we don't have a similar conversation about the new European legislation on artificial intelligence, we don't really have this type of conversation about the new European legislation related to, I don't know, agriculture. Or if we do, that's very rare. Most often than not, we do have debates related to anti-corruption legislation. And to some extent, the whistleblower directive was seen in Romania as directly related to anti-corruption, because Romania used to have a whistleblower protection since 2004, specifically for the public sector, and many corruption cases appeared because some whistleblowers blew the whistle. That's the explanation for that. But for instance, now that the European Union proposed in May a new directive on anti-corruption specifically, nobody talked about the new directive in the Romanian media, because there were some other topics that superseded this new proposal for a new directive. So that's why I'm saying it may be your observation, in a sense, from outside of Romanian society may be true. I am probably too close to see it in the same way.
Okay, you mentioned the sovereignist Romania in its rise.
Yeah.
And that is a huge issue, and I think it deserves attention. Especially in Bulgaria, we are accustomed to there is this understanding that Romanians are some kind of excellent students of Euro-Atlanticism, and I still wonder why Bulgarian media don't notice that maybe somewhere around 25% or even more of Romanian votes right now are probably going to this sector of sovereignist parties. And I wonder, this rise of sovereignism, first of all, I want to ask you what are the reasons for this rise, but also isn't it time to admit that Romania as well as Bulgaria have such a position in international relations that they have apparently also influences from the East. So Russia, Chinese, and other influences from the East. And I know that sovereignism likes to play this card of tradition and cultural specificity, religion, traditional family, etc. But isn't it also right to say that it is some kind of a political representation of national capital, which is a different story? And finally, what change does sovereignism bring to Romania? My guess is that change is never simply good or bad, but maybe change is something structural, maybe it is qualitative. And just as it happened with Dragnya's stop of anti-corruption, maybe sovereignism will bring some change to Romania, which everyone needs to understand or be prepared for.
Again, very interesting questions, but and the combination makes me think. But I will pick on the easiest one. To what extent the sovereignist movement of Romania relates to national capital? The answer is in absolutely no way. The Romanian sovereignist party, or at least the most visible Romanian sovereignist party, is this Alliance for the Unity of Romanians, does not unite national capital. you have some fringe intellectuals combined with some of the football gallery type of people. This alliance of for the unity of Romanians, or whatever it's called, mostly brings together some type of fringe intellectuals with this type of football gallery, let's call them hooligans or something. They appeal to a lot of the lower class voters in Romania, namely the ones that suffer most from the economic inequality that I discussed at the beginning of our interview. So, for instance, a small accountant from an enterprise that used to be public and then was privatized, somebody who doesn't have a higher degree of education, that has recently come out to retirement and suffers greatly from the failure of the Romanian social assistance system, suffers greatly because of inflation. And it's very easy for people like this to say it used to be better back when the enterprise was owned by the state. This is the type of agenda of people that are targeted by this particular party. Now, you can bring in a lot of ideological loads on this type of agenda, and you bring in the anti-vaxxers, you bring in the anti-gay, you bring in the fundamentalist religious people, whether they be Orthodox or Baptist or evangelist, some of the neo-Protestant cults. And this is a true umbrella party for a so-called sovereignist movement that is very easy to capture with a sort of a Russian or a Chinese influence, because it goes mostly against the idea of Europeanization. It goes against the idea of change. It advocates for people to maintain our traditions and values and the old ways of doing things, because we now need to chill, to relax. We now deserve quiet and peace. And all of this change brings a lot turmoil. And this would be my explanation for this type of political movement. For the past 30 years or so, Romania has been changing rapidly. We had reform over reform over reform over reform in a lot of areas and fields and domains, and we have never seen the end of it. So there is a number of people who can adapt to this excitement, to this rhythm of change after change, and some people, like entrepreneurs, thrive on this path of continuous change, but there are some people in society who are tired of all of this change, who are tired of all this reform, who really want to put a stop to it and enjoy the sort of benefits that they think rely on tradition, religion, I don't know, mamaliga, instead of prosciutto crudo. I think this is the dynamic. I am not sure to what extent this is similar in Bulgaria with Возрождение, is it called?
Yes.
The Renaissance Party?
Revival, maybe.
Revival.
Yes.
But I am not surprised to see that now there is a party like that in Moldova. And I think it's also called Возрождение, but probably with the Russian name, not I'm not sure how to pronounce it. This may be in Moldova more of an influence from Russia. But I think maybe for Romania and Bulgaria, it's more of a knee-jerk reaction from people who are tired of all of these changes. That's the way I look at it. And I need to go back to your question because you put together again three specific...
I also had the question, what change does sovereignism bring to Romania or will bring?
Well, to be very frank with you, Vladimir, I hope I do not live the day to see that. Because I simply cannot fathom how Romania can succeed to maintain its territorial integrity if we no longer have money coming in from an Austrian bank, a Dutch shipyard, Brussels European funds, or resilience and reconstruction money. I simply cannot imagine how Romania can survive based only on our own mamaliga.
Okay. We are also now...
And if you ask some of these people from the sovereignist movement, what is their vision of how will Romania, I don't know, develop, succeed, they do not have answers. They are not concerned with creating a vision for sovereign Romania. They are only playing the game of opposing whatever is European or whatever is change. And this is an important observation, I think, because that really proves these people do not have a concrete political agenda for the long term. They only play the populist game of being an anti-system type of movement. So from this perspective, I don't even call them a political party, but just a political movement.